I want to sort of, do a bit of a summing up of Husserl if I can, which you really can't sum up Husserl's writings in a really good way, but I want to, sort of sum up three of his basic things, and because I want to basically just sum up his intentionalities. He talks about a few different kinds of intentionalities, but I mostly want to talk about the double intentionality, which Husserl is often said to create in the human person in the acts that go on, the intentional acts. But the third thing that I think, the third kind of intentionality that there is that the meaning of when something uses a expression, if someone uses an expression in language, the meaning is directed toward whatever is being said is directed toward what the sense of it, or I need to really get into more of that, more of the whole language meaning and expression and indication and signs and all that stuff. I made one video about it, but it wasn't too great. It was not that good of a going into. So I mean, after I get done with the Cartesian meditation stuff and the crisis stuff, I'm gonna start reading more of the ideas in the logische Untersuchungen. So basically, I want to do that. But today, what I want to discuss here in this video is the double intentionality of Husserl. Now, first of all, this comes from a couple things. It comes from the logische Untersuchungen, the logical investigations, where he talks about, he brings in the static phenomenology, where he talks about, the acts, the intentionality from subject to the act. But he talks about that, and that's basically, if I can, I'm going to sort of draw this if I can here. We have person, and this person, let's say he's looking at a book. He's looking at this book. His consciousness at the time is directed toward this book, and at this time he has noema, which refers to the object given to him. When one has noema, there's basically two parts of the structure of act-object intentionality. You have noema, which first is the content part, because through the noema you're given this object, or what you're seeing. The person is given this book through the noema. And then what else you have is you have noesis, which basically gives to the subject the sense of what this is. So when the person has noesis, with noema you get the object, but with the noesis you get the sense, or the whole sense of what this is. So you have a understanding when your consciousness is intended towards this. So this is one part of intentionality. This is in the logical investigation, which he discusses. Also in the ideas, he also discusses this there too. But basically, there's a different part which I really want to get into more, because I have a Husserl. Basically, what he does, he gives this diagram where he has like a triangle, but I want to sort of broaden this, if I can. I'm gonna go this direction. This line is a line of primal impressions. This is the line of initial primal impressions. So this is a primal impression. A primal impression is what is given by the phenomenology of the consciousness of internal time, where in time, when something, comes immediately into consciousness, this is immediately what happens. You get this primal impression. So the immediate time that I see this glass, that is a primal impression. And through time, what happens? You get more primal impressions as time continues. So this is the initial continuum of time that goes this way, basically, through time. And basically, what happens here is we also have I'm going to notice a square as a secondary remembrance. And then we have a recollection, which is more, I'll explain that in a bit. And then we have circle, which is a protension. And then secondary remembrance is also called a retention. So, I'm kind of getting this from Husserl's diagram that he has in the book Phenomenology of the Consciousness of Internal Time. So after you get this primal impression, say of a glass, you get this going down. This is the, continuum of, everything that has to do with this glass. So then what happens, this basically, when this happens, this continuum right here is like looking into the past, because after, as this continues, this is more the future. This is the future after this certain primal impression. And then this continuum is just referring to the continuing of time. And say, here I have a secondary remembrance of this primal impression, let's say of the glass of beer. And basically what happens once you have that secondary remembrance is you get this, whenever you have something like this, this thing gets also its own continuum. And then you can have more secondary remembrances, which has its own continuum. And then also, as this continues, as this time continues, when you're referring to this, you can't have secondary remembrance. You can't have retentions anymore, because basically what retentions are is they are something that can be easily recalled because it very recently happened to you. If I recently saw this glass, I can this is basically relatively recent from one time to another. As time continues to peel off, or as Husserl says, I can have this primary or secondary remembrance because it's sort of fresh in my mind, if you want to say. And then basically what happens when I have this retention or secondary remembrance, whenever something like this happens, a new continuum is created where I can have a retention of having this retention, of having this primal impression. But basically, after this happens, you can have this secondary remembrance or retention. You can't have such things anymore. You can have recollection, which is lesser of a thing here. You can have that, which is basically more. You have to be more intentional of this. This is more of a task to come up with this. This is a recollection of this, basically. And then once you get this recollection, this also gets its own continuum. And then you can have primary remembrances of that, and that also gets its own. Then you can have further and further things that go on. Then you can have another recollection, which gets its own continuum. So this is basically the shading off of time. After you have this one primary impression, or primal impression, time continues to peel off into its own continuum as things shade off. So basically, what happens here is whenever one of any of these things happens, your intentionality is directed to those, to any of those recollections or retentions, and then basically what this happens, each time a primal impression occurs, you get these continuums which sort of continue and continue to break off and all that stuff. And then basically whatever this is, whenever something like this happens, this is its own primal impression, because this creates its own continuum, and whenever something like this happens, it's also its own primal impression. And when this happens, you get this sort of breaking off of continuums. You get what Husserl calls, he calls, this is our sense of times passing by. This is the sense of things sort of, going off in, this is as these primal impressions, secondary remembrances, and recollections go on. This is, whenever these continuums are created and they break off and continue further, this is how we have our consciousness of time. Is because whenever we have one of these things, we are intentionally consciousness of that. And this is called the horizontal intentionality. There's one more aspect to this, though. If I can turn my pen. Where is my pen? Damn it. Anyway, okay. Whenever something like this happens, you can often have a new continuum which goes off up here like that. And then what that will be is mostly a continuum of anticipation or protension. And whenever something like this happens, you get protensions, which is basically anticipation of the future, of what can happen or what will happen. And also, when this happens, you can also get more protensions and more protensions and more protensions. So that's basically a better explanation of the phenomenology of internal time consciousness than I have given before. And this is also, paired with the whole act-object intentionality. So we have this double intentionality in our consciousness. So this is basically what goes on. This is basically a good way to sum that up. But this is also pretty good, a better explanation with this diagram and stuff, because he talks about continuous continuums that go on further. But thank you. I'll continue to make videos about this. And again, if you have anything that you want me to get into, I'd gladly do so.